So we've got a domain, and the point of the boundary defining the domain is, for some reason, we want to be able to establish and maintain that boundary. Now, it doesn't have to be a physical boundary. It can be identifying a collection of things that can wander off, like cows. So we just want all of our cows, but we're not going to put them in a fence. We're going to brand them and set them out on the range so that we can find them again. Doesn't matter the boundary, but somehow or other, we've got to define the things a way to tell what's inside from what's outside. And that means that what we're really doing is implementing access control, right? Fundamentally, security is just about access control. That's it. Then we've got another element that's hanging out here in space, and it wants to join our domain. So what is the event? Well, if we're going to add it, then we got to figure out what it means to add an element in our domain. What are our requirements? So this element comes from some supplier. How have we specified the requirements to that supplier of what kind of element is going to be allowed in our domain? Well, here's where we use the rest of the attributes. So we've got identified, authenticated, and we need to understand what we want. So that's the identified part. And then we got to validate that what is there actually has what it claims to have that is what we want. And that's where the authenticated comes from. This is all part of an identity proofing process that allows an element to be added to a domain. So now it's inside. Once it's inside, we register it and we give it a credential. So we've bought the cow, we brand it. And then it is available to any customer of the domain, because the only reason we need that element or allowed that element in the domain is because it's useful for us for this domain as an essential element of some system to provide the function to larger systems of which it's a part. So that is the value that the domain is supposed to deliver to its customer. So every domain is both a customer and a supplier, remember, because that economic relationship defines two separate exchanges of goods and services in order to complete any economic exchange. Then, once we've got a way to talk about what the domain elements do, well, we need to make sure that it's interoperable with anybody who wants to use it. It's no good saying that I'm going to give you your can of fruit juice if you can't open the can because you don't have a can opener. So you've got the right good and service. It matches the spec, but it's not interoperable with the facilities that the customer has to actually benefit from the consumption or use of that good or service, so they can't get the value. So the only way to make sure that they get the value is to make sure that it's interoperable. And then how do we decide who we give it to is where authorization comes. Are you authorized to receive this can of fruit juice or not? What have you done to allow me to give this to you? Well, you paid me $10. Okay, great. Here you go. This is really it. So this is the core domain theory, how the events and the attributes work, because all of those attributes are involved at some point or another in the handling or initiating those events. We have to understand what it means in terms of any domain for those attributes and those events. And if we've got that figured out, then we understand what our security requirements need to be. They may or may not be feasible. They may or may not be possible, but we at least know what they are. And we got a really simple framework to figure out what they are, because we've got our two basic models. We got the customer-supplier relationship, and we got the essential 8 and the domain events as part of the core definition of the enhanced SABSA domain model. That's it. That's all we need.